I'm your host, Annie Bowles, and this is News du Jour. Hey, you guys, happy Wednesday and welcome back to the News du Jour. So just as a heads up, I wanted to let you guys know that tomorrow is the final day of the January 6th hearings in Congress. And I know political experts and the general public alike are eagerly awaiting the end of all of this to kind of see what the end game is for Congress. Like, are there punishments to be handed out? Are there, parameters they want to put in place to prevent this in the future, etc.? So, we're all curious where they're going with this whole thing. And so, hopefully all the hearings coming to an end will give us some answers in the coming days. So stay tuned for that. And then I'm going to go ahead and start us off with our first story today. So we're discussing the NASA DART mission. So by now you may have heard that NASA exploded an asteroid. But like, when, where, how, why, right? Like, this is the stuff of movies. Why were they exploding asteroids? Was this asteroid going to hit Earth and hurt us? Let's get into it. Okay, so here are the details. NASA is preparing itself for the day that there is an asteroid headed towards Earth that could kill us all or take out an entire city. You get it. Like dinosaur style. But that was not what was happening here. Instead, to get prepared, NASA chose an asteroid called Dimorphos, and it was about 7 million miles out from Earth, and they made this bad boy the target of a mission called DART, or the Double Asteroid Redirection Test. And this was actually the second half of this test, but NASA had this spacecraft circle the sun for about 10 months while it waited for the right moment to strike at this space rock. And then it went, pursued the asteroid until it fully smashed into it. And this was a very exciting moment at NASA. This is what they had been working towards. And as a few news outlets put it, losing contact with a spacecraft is usually a bad thing. But in this case, it was their ideal outcome. You see, they wanted to see if they could track the asteroid well enough to give this spacecraft a chance to smash into it and throw it off course. And they were successful with that. Now, we won't know for weeks or even months if this action managed to knock the asteroid enough to have redirected it. And it may be years before we try and scale it up and hit something bigger, because this was a pretty small asteroid that was hit. But today, NASA pretty much hit a perfect bullseye. And with the cause of potentially saving humanity in the future, it's a pretty big win. And next up for today, Finland offers 160 days of parental leave for both parents. Finland is now breaking new ground with an unprecedented offering of 160 days of paid parental leave for both parents who are welcoming a new child. As someone who just went through this process, I have to say, It's just as important that dads have time off as moms do. Not just for bonding purposes, which are extremely important in and of themselves, but also to support the moms. If we are busy feeding a baby around the clock and putting them down for naps, etc., and tending to them, how are we getting fed? Who is doing the laundry? Who's taking the dog out, etc.? In order for life to function at least somewhat normally, 2 sets of hands is pretty vital at home. My husband had a month off when we had our son, and while I am so grateful for that, recognizing that a lot of women don't even have that as an option, I did not feel like it was enough. I was terrified for him to go back to work, and it doesn't have to be that way. Additionally, Finland is providing childcare subsidies for both parents, an allowance for when you're out on maternity leave so you could take it a little early if you wanted to, and they can also shift those days of allowance from parent to parent depending on who needs them. So parents can now in Finland spend up to 14 months at home with their baby without worry. Saying that honestly brings tears of utter jealousy to my eyes. These days with a new baby are so limited and so precious. What I would give to have that right now. Talk about a work-life balance. And next up for today, there is a hurricane hitting Cuba and Florida. So Hurricane Ian is proving to be pretty powerful, you guys. It's now getting labeled as a Category 3 storm as of the time that I am recording this. And thousands of flights and tons of sporting events have been canceled. Evacuation orders have been put in place, and everyone is quickly bracing themselves for this storm. You know, things like stacking sandbags, boarding up windows, taking shelter, and evacuating where people can. Ian made landfall yesterday morning in Cuba, where people are pretty well trapped, and it is expected to bring the usual heavy rain, flooding, and high winds. Mudslides are always a possibility as well when the flooding occurs, so that is something people are on the lookout for too. But while the storm is already soaking Cuba, what is really interesting and noteworthy as well is that this storm looks like it is set to hit Tampa, Florida, which is actually significant. If you don't know Florida geographically that well, Tampa is kind of midway up the arm of Florida, if that makes sense. And it's kind of sheltered on Florida's west side thanks to Mexico and Cuba. So while it is a coastal city and hurricanes hit Florida all the time, Tampa has actually not seen a hurricane since 1921. That is 101 years ago, according to the National Weather Service. So while this is not a fun milestone, it's a significant one. Just wanted to make sure you guys knew that, and we'll keep you posted on this storm. And lastly, before we go for today, I wanted to let you guys know that the protests in Iran seem to be ongoing, which is so crazy. And like I mentioned before, they have become very female-centric. This is definitely a woman power moment in Iran, and the modern woman there is pissed. And in order to get a better understanding of what's going on, if you haven't listened to Friday's episode, so Friday, September 23rd, I highly recommend going back and listening to that episode because it has all of the background and details of why these protests are happening. They basically broke out because a 22-year-old woman was killed in police custody for not covering her hair. So if you want more details about how that all played out and what happened, definitely consider going back and listening to Friday's episode. And for today, that is the news du jour. Today, I wanted to leave you with the quote, "Diplomacy is the art of telling people to go to hell in such a way that they ask for directions. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider becoming a patron of our podcast. For $7.99 a month, you can unlock tons of perks like breaking news text messages so that you're never out of the loop. Tons of bonus episodes are already up there ready for you to binge, and a discussion board full of networking opportunities and much more. Go to www.patreon.com/sugarfreemedia today to become a patron. This is the best way to support our show. Our patrons make News du Jour possible. But a couple other ways to support our podcast are rate and review on whatever podcast platform you use to listen, share on your social media, you have influence, tell your friends, family, and colleagues that you love News du Jour and why you listen. You can also follow us on social media under sugarfreemedia.co on Instagram, just sugarfreemedia, all one word, on TikTok, and sugarfree_media on Twitter. We also have a weekend newsletter called Dreamers Digest that's full of dreamy content recommendations for your weekend and a life update from yours truly. Sign up today on our website, www.sugarfreemedia.co. Our music is by Joey Lavoie and Nicholas Foster. Our cover art is by Hannah Pierce Photography. Our Sugar Free Media logo is by Catherine Jezik Designs. Any twinkling or little footsteps you might hear in the background are by my dog, Rhett. He's a rescue pup and always records with me. We appreciate you listening and look forward to telling you about the news again next time on News du Jour.
Broadcasting from Oklahoma.